This video looks at rivers and wetlands. The most important thing that rivers and wetlands have in common is, of course, water. Water, or H2O, is vital for life on this planet, and life on this planet couldn't exist without it. Rivers and wetlands have water in common, and other things too, but after that it tends to get a bit muddy. Some people include rivers as wetlands, while others don't. Wetlands International, a not-for-profit organization working to protect and restore wetlands around the world, says that wetlands occur where water meets land. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration in the US says a wetland is an area of land that is saturated with water. Ramsar, an international convention aiming to conserve wetlands, and which came about in 1971, and which has an Irish committee, goes into quite a bit more detail. But it does say that wetlands include water that is flowing, such as rivers. But talking about rivers and wetlands in Ballincollig today, I'm going to use a guide to habitats in Ireland. A guide to habitats in Ireland lists habitat types that can be found in Ireland. It was produced by the Heritage Council and is free to download from their website, the National Biodiversity Data Centre website, and the National Parks and Wildlife Service website. Or you could, in a guide to habitats in Ireland, in the freshwater section, there's a section on water courses, and that includes depositing lowland rivers, and that's probably the most common freshwater habitat type in and around Ballincollig. When a guide to habitats talks about rivers, it includes smaller streams as well as larger rivers. And probably the most important large depositing river in the Ballincollig area is the River Lee. The River Lee is an important river for leisure, but also as a source of drinking water, bathing water, water for use in agriculture, industry, and to some extent energy production. From a biodiversity point of view, it's really important because of the habitat it provides for a range of different species. The National Biodiversity Data Centre has lots of records of species that have been recorded in and around Ballincollig, including a number of bird species that are associated with rivers. Some of these are protected bird species and include the sand martin and the common kingfisher. Records from mammals associated with rivers include the European otter and Daubenton's bat, both of which are protected species. There are records for at least 5 of our native fish species, and 2 of those are in danger of extinction in Ireland. The eel is critically endangered, and the Atlantic salmon is vulnerable to extinction. And there are records of a number of non-native fish species too. As well as mammal, bird, and fish species, there are snails, flies, and a whole host of other invertebrate species that rely on freshwater in some way. There are far too many to go into in this short video, so I'll talk about one group. We have 24 native dragonflies and damselflies, and of those, 7 were recorded in and around Ballincollig. These included the beautiful demoiselle and large red damselflies. There was only one record for a dragonfly, the common darter, but it's quite likely that there are more species yet to be recorded. Of the 360 plant species records found for this Biodiversity Action Plan in the National Biodiversity Data Centre, there are about 50 plant species that are usually associated with the banks of rivers and other wet places. These are species like purple loosestrife, water mints, hemlock water dropwort, fool's watercress, and others. Only about 7 plant species recorded here, like common water crowfoot, are truly aquatic plant species. Unfortunately, a number of invasive plant species, like Himalayan balsam, were recorded growing along riverbanks. Rivers are really good at moving nutrients around, and they're also a really good way for native freshwater plant and animal species to get around. Unfortunately, this means that they're also a really good way for pollutants and non-native invasive alien plant and animal species to get around too. In a recent report, the Environmental Protection Agency said that nearly half of all our rivers are not doing too good biologically. I found that report on the website of catchments.ie. That's a great place to find out ways that you and your community can help your rivers. So, a guide to habitats has 4 running water habitats like rivers and streams. But there are a lot more wetland habitats in Ireland. For freshwater habitats, there are 10. For peatlands like bogs and fens, that's another 8. You can add another 4 for wet woodland habitat types, and 2 for wet grasslands and marshes. So inland in Ireland, we've already got quite a lot of wetland habitats. But then again, I suppose it does rain quite a lot. And of course, at the coasts, we've got different types of salt marsh and dune slacks. And just offshore in the intertidal zone, there's a whole host of other wetland habitats. And different wetland habitats can support their own assemblages of species, such as birds, fish, mammals, invertebrates, or amphibians and others, as well as plants. And if they're properly looked after, these habitats can provide valuable services for human beings too, such as storing carbon, reducing the impact of floods, and preventing erosion. As well as its rivers and streams, Ballincollig has some other quite nice wetland habitats. One of those is a fen-type habitat that's found near the Cloisters housing estate. And funnily enough, each time we visited this wetland, it was raining. In the winter, it doesn't really look like much. But come the summer, it's quite a different story. The plants growing here are plants found in 2 fen habitat types listed in A Guide to Habitats in Ireland, and both of those have similarities to fen habitats listed in the Habitats Directive, which is European legislation designed to protect habitats and species. And at the stables there's another wetland that in the winter seems to be mainly open water, but by the end of April is already lush with vegetation and full of the sound of birds. It's estimated that as much as 2/3 of wetland habitats have been lost across Europe in the last 100 years. Today in Ireland, even our wetland habitats that are protected by European law are not doing very well at all. As well as providing habitat for many plant and animal species, different wetland habitats can play an important role in storing carbon and reducing flooding. So it's really important that we at least protect those we have left, and better still, that we restore some of those that we've lost. Fortunately, even for wetlands that aren't protected by European law, a lot of local authorities now are trying to protect them and other habitats in their development plans. You can find out more about Ireland's wetlands and how you can help them on the website of the Irish Ramsar Wetlands Committee.